became super clear that it's the emotions and the culture around money. That's what's really moving us. That's what's making the decision for us almost. And the fear and the scarcity and the anxiety that are produced by those stories, more so than knowing about compound interests and investment strategies.
Today on the Freelance Mindset Studio podcast, I'm so excited because we have our first live in-person episode, and Neha Vadrevu is here to kick us off. So thank you, Neha, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Neha is many things. She's an applied anthropologist, and her career has had a very diverse journey, working in corporate, then also working as an actress, dancer, model. And she's also been a tech founder in addition to adjunct professor. Neha, thank you again for being here. And my first question to you is, since you've had such a diverse career, are there moments in a person's life where a corporate job makes more sense than a freelance, and when a freelance makes more sense than corporate?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of balancing that needs to happen, especially with financial resources. And interestingly, the latest startup that I was working on is about financial anxiety and the stories that dictate our financial lives. So that's a huge component of when corporate versus freelance might be better for you. And then there's also the other side of that balancing equation is, does your soul and your spirit feel free? So I feel like, do you have the cash flow to survive in today's world? And then does your soul, heart, mind, spirit, etc., feel like, oh, I can really breathe, I can be myself, you know? So I think that's often what leads people to go into freelance. But ironically, the that I can breathe, you start feeling like you can't breathe if the you know resources, financial resources are constrained. So you it's interesting if you exit for the very reason that kind of plunges you back into corporate. So that's, I feel like that's the balancing act, like, do you feel free in both of these areas?
I love that. Do you feel free is such an important question. And I think I'm really intrigued by what you said about financial anxiety and how that shapes our lives and our decisions. Can you tell us more about what you found, through your eyes as an anthropologist?
Yeah, absolutely. So I led research at Capital One's Innovation Lab, and before that, I did a contract gig with them, working on their first ever AI virtual assistant, which was called Eno. So it was a lot of talking to people about their personal finances, about how they'd want to interact and feel comfortable, and how we could bake in trust and safety into a virtual assistant. And then when I shifted over to the Innovation Lab, I got to talk to hundreds of people about their life stories. And I just saw time and time again how emotional they were and how grateful they were to be vulnerable about money and not just talk about, oh, I need to save this much so that I have this much left over for rent and entertainment and whatnot. They were like, no, I had some financial trauma when we immigrated to the US. I am really scared of credit cards because I saw family members go really, get really in a lot of trouble with credit card debt. So as I kept seeing that, it became super clear that it's the emotions and the culture around money. That's what's really moving us. That's what's making the decision for us almost. And the fear and the scarcity and the anxiety that are produced by those stories, more so than knowing about compound interests and investment strategies, right? So I uh, I really took that to heart, and years later saw that people still were not approaching money from this angle, and so that's when I created Incluya, my AI financial startup.
So, one of the things you said that really fascinates me is this concept of financial trauma, which I don't think is something that gets a lot of attention. Can you explain what financial trauma is and how that might drive a person's behavior later?
Yeah, and I'll also add that part of our mission is to heal generational financial trauma and not just the trauma you have. So that trauma can be a story that's told over generations. Well, we're poor people. We're always going to be poor. And there is such a thing as poverty brain that kind of stunts your growth and your ability to learn and absorb. So there's all kinds of things that hinder and create those limits. And that's some form of trauma or a traumatic story being told and retold and regurgitated and kind of accepted as fact. Other forms of financial trauma are some of the most horrific, severe forms that we actually got to help start healing people from was people who were victims of human trafficking since they were kids. And so their relationship with the actual money, being in exchange for their bodies is so it's riddled with shame and disgust. And they have an opportunity to talk about it. We created a safe space for them to say, well, my story. I don't have to keep telling my story over and over again because that could also be re-triggering. So that's another form of financial trauma. And most people who've suffered any kinds of mental, physical, emotional abuse, it's coupled with financial abuse 99% of the time. So withholding money and saying, you can't do this or you can't leave. How are you going to survive? Um, yeah, using money as manipulation, all kinds of things have been done to traumatize people in the financial realm. And it's not just people who've had limited financial resources. I mean, there's people who are really well off, but they are very lonely because they're sort of, maybe trauma is a very intense word to use for them, but their anxiety is around who's really here for me as a human versus my money. So it runs across socioeconomic lines.
That's really powerful, and that's an area that we just don't talk about enough as a society. Now, I imagine as a freelancer, at least from my own experience, working for yourself can really amplify some of these insecurities and really shape our behavior. What are some of the ways that you've seen freelancers are kind of uniquely exposed or at the mercy of their own financial stories?
I think one of the ones that we've talked about often is knowing how much you deserve and how much to ask for, and also some amount depending on how much you've been making or not making. It might seem like a lot, and you got the courage to ask for this much, but then you didn't realize that this has to last. Yes, you got paid for the month, and for the month that looks like a really healthy amount, but it has to last in those dry spells. So there's all kinds of considerations here. And yeah, I do think one of the biggest things is asking for what you deserve and asking for things that cover your basic needs. And also, you're not asking for, like, here's the project I'm going to do for 1 month. You're saying, you're paying for 10 years of me becoming a super expert in this domain. You're paying for the education, the formal and experiential education that I'm bringing to the table, So really valuing yourself, I think that's a constant struggle.
Yeah, and I think for freelancers, this is a conversation that has to happen over and over, I think, with yourself and with your client every time you send an invoice, anytime you pitch the next project, because unlike in corporate, where your salary is set for the next, 12 months or so, at least, a freelancer, every project, you have the possibility of sliding backwards or undercharging yourself. And so you have to keep doing some of that inner work. What are some of the practices in inner work that help you continue to grow and find this place of expansion?
I think recently, as in the last couple years, I've gotten deeper and deeper into what spirituality means in every realm of my life. And one of those things is that there's a higher power out there that supports you and wants you to blossom and be the best that you can be. And you've been put on this earth not so you could cap yourself at a certain dollar amount or, work so hard that you get burnt out. I'm like, there's a beautiful life that's been gifted to us. We made it, and that the chances were slim,
Yeah.
and we made it here and we're healthy and we have a lot of privilege in many ways that we don't even realize day to day. So all of those things are fueling some of my recent paths towards prosperity. And I will also say, we talked about this, what is the fastest path to gratitude? Because there's going to be so much turbulence in both freelance and if you have a corporate job. I mean, it's just inevitable. That's just life. But if you can find the fastest path to gratitude, and what I mean by that is you really feel like, I am so blessed for XYZ. You really have to feel it. But yeah, what is that that's going to get you to that feeling fastest? That will kind of shine the light in terms of getting out of a sticky situation or getting out of your head or your limitations. I think that's been one mechanism that's really worked, and there's a lot of others, but it does have that base of spirituality and everything.
That's very powerful. Uh, I want to shift gears a little bit from here and talk about how to get to the next level of scaling, because there are people who are in the middle of their freelance journey and maybe, have six-figure income and figured out how to make that stable, but are trading their time for money. And eventually you run out of hours to sell. And what do you do then? You hit a limit. And so I'm curious, kind of, what are your thoughts? Because you have explored founding a tech company, working in corporate, and being a freelancer. What are your thoughts about scaling beyond hourly wages?
I think, and I'm still working on this very much, by the way, but I think making yourself a brand, and that way you can kind of dip your toe in all of those. So let's say you're a freelancer trading time for money, and then the obvious one is selling courses, but there's also brand partnerships. There might be an actual product or a tool that you develop, especially with Claude Code and whatnot. It's become faster, cheaper, easier to do that. But again, you're infusing your wisdom from your freelance work and from all the consulting that you've done. And hopefully that's just a passive income stream. And then there's also the obvious, investments and all of that. But I think, and then in terms of corporate, if you could dip back in and say, I'm trading time, but I'm also doing some advisory work, like very limited, very potent advisory work that you charge a lot for. And there's some advisory boards, there's companies that ask for like super specialists and they'll pay really great hourly rate. I think those are kind of like having your presence in all of those aspects is a good way to do it.
Yeah. And I noticed you said dip your toe back into corporate. So this is something both of us have done. I think a lot of folks are in corporate and then they think, okay, I have to gather the courage and make the leap into freelance. And for some people, that is a one-way door and they find freelance works for the rest of their career. But for other folks, there comes a time where there's a decision point to come back to corporate. Can you talk about, what are some of the factors that make going back to corporate make sense? And for anybody who's thinking like going back to corporate is somehow a failing at being a freelancer, what advice would you give to that person?
Well, first, I would say definitely don't call it a failure. It's your life. And if something's not making you happy or helping you feel free, the freelance can be the biggest trap. Then it's time to look for other opportunities. I mean, freelance, it gives you creative ownership. Um, you hunt for your own work, and some people find thrill in that. And then there's just making your own hours. Yes, there's all of those things. There's also the loneliness. You don't have colleagues, you don't have um, a guaranteed income in a few months. You have to constantly be on this wheel of searching for work, uh, business development, etc. So I think that there's no shame in saying, I don't want to spend my life hunting for work anymore. I don't want to spend my life agonizing about, okay, I'm good for next 3, 4 months, but what about 6 to 12 months from now? There is absolutely no shame in saying, I just want to be around people. I want a community. I remember I had the funniest colleagues, which I did. And in several of my corporate gigs. And it's okay to want that. I mean, you really have to look at why, and then also, again, it's your life. So how are you designing your life? And you're not beholden to the freelance choice that you made. And it's great that you did it, and that's fine to pivot.
Yeah, I think the loneliness is one of the kind of most underestimated aspects of freelancing. Everyone thinks about selling and how will they get the income, but then sustaining that as an individual is a totally different ballgame. What are some ways that you found community as a freelancer?
I remember when I first set out and I said I wanted to be an applied anthropologist and I only want to do it in New York City. I joined several meetups. I joined the Center for Social Innovation and made some really good friends there. I joined a lot of communities, and because I was freelancing, I was like, well, I don't have money to become a member, but I have some time in exchange for being part of this community. So I'd volunteer so that I had access to the space for Center for Social Innovation, and I had access to their events. And and then yeah, I would also make it a point to set co-working days. I also lived in a co-working and co-living space in Brooklyn when I first moved to New York. So that was also great because someone would be like, can we just work? And it's 10 p.m. on a Friday. I'm like, yes. Yeah.
Music to my very nerdy ears. Um, what are some of the toughest lessons that you've learned through your freelance journey, and any advice that you could give to somebody that could prevent them from having to learn it the hard way like you did?
Some people will backstab you with the biggest smile on their face. And you can get swayed by sweet talk or again that literal smile on their face and not realize that no, they don't respect you. They don't respect your time, and they are trying to extract from you. And that's not to say, I mean, look, I had a startup and we didn't have funding. So I asked people to, whoever wanted to intern for us to intern. But I was like very cognizant of the fact that I was not paying them. And I hope that I did justice to saying, please like be here as long as you can. But I recognize that this is not like what you deserve. But with that said, not everyone will do that. Not everyone will say, you deserve more, or you deserve to have a higher position. And you have to be really aware again of first of all, are they doing that? But also, what is your place and what do you deserve?
Yeah, I think especially without an anchor to how much your services are worth or what is the market price for a freelance rate, especially when the projects are custom, especially when you're charting your own path, you're new at freelancing but not necessarily new at doing the work. It's very hard to know what is the right amount to charge and how what growth can look like in that role. We talked a little bit about spirituality earlier, but what are some other touchstones that allow people to realize when they've been undercharging and where they can, you know, get a price that's more fair for the value they're delivering?
I think, well, first, one big tell is if you give the client a number and they agree to it right away, which
Yeah.
happened to me. That's like, oh my God, I undercharged myself. And in my situation, luckily, they liked my work so much they asked for a second round of the project or a different project, and I was able to negotiate up. So that's one. Another one is just, are you covering all the expenses? Like, do you have materials in addition to time that you spent your own money on? You're like, oh, it's okay, I could just cover it. Oh, I could just do this. Well, I have to take out, it's a business development thing, and I have to take people out for coffees to kind of get them warmed up to buy our product. And somehow you didn't negotiate a budget for that. I mean, look at all of those things. Also, your what is a dignified life for you, and what does that dignity cost, or like what like a safe place to live and a comfortable commute and not taking a dangerous train after a really late work event, so all of those things if you factor them in and say, okay, so for all of that, all of my basic expenses and my expertise and whatever AI and the internet say that a person in my position and my experience should get, and what I'm spending to kind of like, these additional going above and beyond, adding all those up, that should give you a really great sense of what you should ask for.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And I appreciate you mentioning AI. I didn't ask about that yet, but you are an AI founder or have been. And so, what are some ways that freelancers can use AI to uplevel their financial lives?
I will say I had this really fun uh, provisional contract as an interior designer. I don't think I talked about that. And that was when I was like, thank God for AI, because I was hired because I have a sense of style, but I'd never like formally designed anything and I didn't know how to price things. So AI really helped me. And I would encourage everyone to not just accept the first thing. If you say, "Oh, I'm an interior designer and I want to do this. I'm a business insights consultant and I want to put together a proposal." Don't accept the first proposal that AI gives you. Have a dialogue with it and say, wait, I also did this and considering I have to, for the interior design thing, for example, I have to haul things back and forth. And that's like, it's not just selecting the items and placing them, like it's going to be a lot of labor. So is this enough? Is this enough? And it almost doubled from my initial asking point. And I was like, I'm not trying to pretend I'm like a big luxury designer and I have like a studio, but price me a little bit under that, but also price me in again, that dignified level. And I was really happy with that. So use AI as a true sounding board and not just like, okay, you gave me this and I'll accept it. But it is super helpful for that.
That is something I had not thought about because we have to negotiate our rates. But first, before the negotiation with the client, we have to negotiate with AI and make sure that we are bringing ourselves up to a correct level. So, with a human, if they agree very quickly, you know that you've probably undercharged yourself. With AI, I guess it's a little bit different because you know the first one could potentially be a low ball. But at what point do you know that you are at a range in the price level AI is quoting to you that is acceptable to then take to a client?
I think ask AI a million different ways. Like, okay, what is, for interior design, say, okay, I'm doing interior design in this city. What do other people charge for space this big, blank canvas, etc. And um, ask, well, what is someone who's doing this freelance charging? And what if I have a unique viewpoint being Indian and I can bring in like different cultural influences into my interior design? So, what added advantage is that? And how can I use that to charge more? Just be super creative and thorough about all the questions you ask AI, because that is like a really big gift that you have. You don't have to go and ask the client and you don't have to go back and forth. You kind of have this testing ground. And I think that will really set you up, but be exhaustive about the questions you ask AI. And then also don't do it all in one go. Sleep on it, ask the next day, because some new things might come into your mind that you didn't consider before.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And as much as it is a gift for the freelancer, the client is probably having the same conversation with AI. And so you know that you want your dialogue to meet in the middle. And with some additional questions, you can get there. Um, I am just curious, what prompted you in the beginning to go freelance the first time? And how have your thoughts about going freelance changed? How many times have you gone freelance from corporate freelance? I've gone several times myself. Yeah. I haven't counted. Um, how has your decision point to go freelance changed each time?
Yeah, I think the first time it was, I have a unique vantage point and I think things can be done better. I think sales, marketing, product innovation can be done uh, more thoroughly and brilliantly with the power of anthropology. I almost said AI, but anthropological intelligence. There we go. And that was, yeah, that was like 11 years ago. And it was just that itch to do something more excellently. And it wasn't about money at all. I don't know if it's ever been about money when I went freelance. And then going back to corporate was uh, to get that financial stability. And it did feel like, oh, I could breathe a little bit, you know. There was that relief. And then again, when I went into the arts and I went full time into acting and screenwriting, it was that a different kind of like, I want to be excellent, but in a way that corporate cannot contain. You know, I want to be an artist. I want to see who that person is inside of me. So that was more, I would say, yeah, getting to know a part of myself that's kind of been sidelined, or like it's always been a hobby and a side gig, but I just wanted to see what that would feel like to be that person. And then wanting to step back into corporate with, you know, the current job market. But again, I don't want to use that as an entire excuse, but I didn't get the corporate job that I thought I could just fall back into previously. So then all of the introspection I did led me to start the startup, and really look at um, how can all these influences be channeled into something that could really benefit people, instead of me saying, oh, I did a bunch of random things and they just kind of, you know, evaporated.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think my own journey, I left corporate the first time because I got an opportunity to act, which was just, it felt once in a lifetime and I couldn't say no. The next time I left corporate was I had reached a level of stability with my student loans, and I just felt that the job that I was working was not the right exchange of
Mm.
cash for the amount of hours and health and well being that I was putting into it. And so I left to go take care of myself. And then I ended up making more as a freelancer than I would have had I stayed. And then there have been times I've taken jobs for health insurance, for loneliness, and freelance has always been on the other side as uh, freedom and opportunity to travel, to set my own rates, to make more per hour. Whether that is always more per year, that becomes a choice that you make over the course of the year. But what I really liked in what you said was that going into corporate should be a choice, like a decision point. I think I see in a lot of people uh, maybe a fear of imagination or fear of dreaming, where they think corporate is the only possibility and they can't think what else is outside of that and available to them. What helps you imagine or see all of these other possibilities for yourself?
I think I just have a weird brain.
Plus one.
But yeah, but I like this term, the fear of imagination, and it just didn't occur to me because my brain imagines whether I like it or not. I'm like, can you calm down? Can you stop imagining all these parallel lives? Like, I want to be in a jungle 1 minute, and I want to be like Jane Goodall. I think that's, I don't know how to operate any other way. And sometimes I feel like there's a level of, I mean, I have grapheme synesthesia, so I feel like people who have their synesthesia expressed where the senses are crossed, and for me it's like I read in color, I see numbers in color, so things are color coded. There's already like a mix up in something, and so I just see possibility differently. And then that combined with dance, and for me dance is like music come to life, you know, music presented through the body. And so I feel like all of these things, um, all these ways that I'm wired, yeah, like naturally lead me to see different possibilities and see the world in a different way. And what people call imagination is me just like having a normal day with my brain. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. And I think that may be a unique case for people who maybe have a dream, right? They have the
Mhm.
imagination, but fear getting really invested in it or like encouraging that dream because of the possibility that it won't work out, that they will get hurt, and are afraid to kind of take a chance in that sense. Is that something that you've ever experienced and have any tools or techniques that helped you move past that?
I think the acting was really a consequence of me doing those exercises like you're 85, you're 95, you're in the hospital, you're at the end of your life, and will you regret this? Not doing this, you know?
Mhm.
So I feel like, we've many of us have heard that a bunch of times, but have you really gone there? Really let your like head to toe insides, really imagine that and plunge yourself into that. Oh, okay, I'm 95 and I just kind of like slept on this opportunity or shied away from it or let fear dictate. And I'm also very cautious to say that because follow your dreams and go for it, has led a lot of people to uh, broken hearts in a certain way because the dream that they imagined did not turn out the way they wanted it to, or it led them to, most likely financial ruin and all of this stuff. So I'm cautious to say there's both sides of that, but you should really look inside of yourself and say, can I maybe you could put safety nets around. Maybe you can downsize your life so that you can support that dream so that you don't have regrets on your deathbed. So I would say look at everything, consider all the factors, be imaginative and responsible at once. It's possible, and then see where that takes you.
I love that. Be imaginative and responsible at once. That is possible, and you can put safety nets and you can de-risk the risky dream and find ways to get your cash flow,
Mhm.
and you don't have to go all the way from, one safe, stable role to financial ruin. There are many intermediary stops to course correct along the way and grow and learn. So
Yeah.
this has been an amazing conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with the audience of freelancers?
I would just really emphasize if you're freelancing, um, allow yourself to ask why you're doing it every few months, and make sure you're looking out for number one, which is you. And if you do that, hopefully your freelance journey will be beautiful, and it will allow you to be free, and yeah, it'll be prosperous.
Well, thank you so much, Neha. Where on the internet can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn at Vaijayanti is my first name, but I go by Neha, my middle name Vadrevu, and also Instagram Vaijayanti Neha Vadrevu, and email Vaijayanti Vyjayanthi at rasa.c.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neha, for
Thank
joining.
you. Thank you.